Hello, and thank you for coming back to another episode. Make it exciting as
Exactly.
well. Yeah.
Exactly. And then part of that empowerment means that if you need help, if you need support, if you're struggling with some symptoms of the menopause or whatever, we should go and get some help from the GP or
Yes.
search out some sort of support for ourselves, if it means talking to our peers or
Mm,
helping ourselves, doing some research. Absolutely.
yeah. Like you say, talking to other people really helps people who are in similar situations,
Yes.
and it just feels makes you feel like okay, um, they're just like me. I'm just like them, and it's
Yes.
what I'm not different. I'm still
Yes.
still relevant and still important because it can also, these symptoms can affect one's confidence quite
Yes.
significantly. So yeah, it is important to talk to people who maybe are going through similar situations just to help with that self-confidence and
Yeah.
assurance.
Assurance and sort of give compassion to yourself. Of
Yeah,
course, talking to people where people's stories resonate with you, but also everybody's different, everybody's experience is different
different.
as well.
That's
So,
the key thing.
you know,
Yeah.
I sort of keep saying to myself, if we compare, we despair. Because it's something that was coming up for me also, the sorts of thoughts that were coming to me at that time was that sense of, oh my God, in my mind, menopause is for old ladies. But my body was going through it, but my brain hadn't sort of caught up with that
Well,
thinking yet. You know, um, where was I going with it? This was going somewhere, and I can't quite remember. So that's another thing
the brain
Josephine
fog.
happens to me that I
That's
I
the brain
can't
fog.
remember. Yeah, and I definitely can say that happened to
Mm,
me. I sort of forget, or I've become very forgetful. Uh,
mm,
can't remember where I put my keys, or I sort of lose my train of thought.
yeah,
Um, and people think, "Oh, what's wrong with her?" I worry that people are thinking that. And I
yeah,
always tended to be somebody who sort of goes off and is thinking about ideas and stuff, but it's become much worse. That is
yeah,
something definitely I've noticed.
yeah. And I think again, once we know that this is part of this phase of life, like you
Yes.
said, having that compassion, just understanding that it's not you per se, it's just this phase
Yeah.
that is making you be that way. So you kind of learn to accept it and just say, okay. Yeah, because it happens a lot to me when you lose your thought. You're in the middle of a sentence and you forget what you're going to say, and I just stop. I've just learned to just stop and think, okay, let other people fill in the blanks
Yes,
somehow,
exactly.
and be kind to myself, not beat myself up because I
Yeah.
lost my train of thought.
If it's important, it will come back. If it's
Hmm.
important, that thought will come back to you.
Yeah.
So,
And if it doesn't come back there, then I just say, oh, I'll come back to you. I just can't remember at this point in time. And well,
exactly. Exactly. Well, did we have the luxury of having at least that sort of confidence when you were younger? I'd have been
mm,
mortified. I'd have been beating myself up. So
yes.
that's the grace of aging and the sort of
Yes.
positivity that comes with things.
Yeah.
Um,
I like one of the things you said that if you compare, you despair. That's the thing. We're all
yes,
different. So the
yes,
fact that I'm having a particular experience which is really, really bad for me,
mm,
and somebody else is experiencing something different. I mean, again, we have different symptoms that affect us in
yeah,
different ways to different extents. So doesn't mean that they're also free of things. Well, my problem is not their problem. Their problem is not my problem. We just have different
yeah.
experiences of
It's
this
a different
phase of life.
experience.
Yeah.
I mean, remembering my mother,
Mm,
she was 54 or 55.
mm,
Uh, at that time when she was having flushes and
yeah.
sort of really going through it. It all happened very in a straightforward way, albeit I've had some issues, with skin. So we can
Mm.
talk about that in a minute. But, got over relatively unscathed.
That's what you think, looking from the outside.
Yes, having gone through it, I can look back and say, actually, yes, I went through a few things, but it's okay. I'm okay,
Mm.
kind of
Because,
thing. And it could have been worse. Or, looking at
mm,
if I had sort of said, well, if I'd had some expectations or some ideas, my experience has not been like my mother's at all. It's been a different
mm,
experience.
yes.
Um, so,
But then that's with not knowing what she actually went through, and you
yes,
know about the hot flushes. You don't know what other symptoms that she had to cope with. And I
yes,
suppose in their generation, there wasn't that openness, like we talked about cultural
yes,
issues, which we're going to go into now. There
yeah,
wasn't that openness about discussing this phase of life. It was a hush hush, maybe amongst
yeah,
just women their age and things like that.
yes.
And so we don't really know what they went through. Uh, all we know, my mom as well, all I knew was hot flushes.
Mm,
So, and my mother-in-law, hot flushes. That was the only thing I could associate with the menopause. And then you
yeah.
start to realize there's a lot. But maybe they
There's a
didn't
lot
even
more.
know. Maybe they didn't know. I don't know. Maybe they never knew that they were experiencing those symptoms as parts of their menopausal transition. Who knows? I don't know.
It would be very interesting, don't you think, to get to sort
Hmm.
of gather people's stories on this,
Yeah.
uh, what people know, what there's out there, what they understood the menopause is,
Yeah. So maybe we
understand.
should say, let's for those who have their moms still around, speak to your mom and just ask them, how did they, what kind of experiences did they have
Yes.
in at those ages? Maybe that will shed more light on things for us because all we heard about was just hot flushes.
Hot flushes is
Uh,
all it was.
that's all
And
it
and
was.
to ask, where did you learn about, what did did you ever talk about, where did your mum learn about the menopause? Who talked to her?
Mm, yeah. I think they just associated this with a particular, when they hit their 50s or nearing their 50s, they
Yeah.
expected to experience that. But yeah, it will be interesting to maybe we should do a little bit of a little research on that. So let's talk about Maria, and thank you so much for all that you've shared. I really appreciate that, and I hope our audience also appreciate that, and maybe they can also relate to some of the things that you've discussed.
Hmm.
Um, so we're going to talk about maybe cultural issues, because you're from an Asian heritage, although
Hmm.
like you say, you're very westernized now,
Yes.
and I'm from an African heritage, and like
Yeah.
you, very westernized now as well.
Yes.
But what is cool the impact of culture on this phase of life, or how do our cultures embrace or reject
Hmm.
women at this stage of life?
That's a really deep question, Josephine. And I mean, I look brown. I was born in Kenya, but my thinking, I'm thinking is very much sort of Western, is very much influenced by the normative, the wider sort of
Yeah.
Western culture. I suppose, I wonder what sort of societal constructs we have about the value of woman if she's older, if she's got gray hair, if you have to keep dyeing your hair, or if she's as attractive as she was before,
Before.
if there's wisdom, if wisdom is held in higher regard, or as high regard as looks. I
Mm,
mean, I'm also thinking about the different sort of cultural perspectives on menopause.
mm,
Um, that's something I read somewhere, that, I read somewhere in India, for example, in Rajasthan, women cover their heads and sort of live in deference with women, with men. They don't sit with men and all that kind of stuff. But once they go through the menopause, they're sort of in an equal position to men, and they'll sit there with their heads uncovered and chatting with the men freely, which they wouldn't have been able to do before.
Mm.
So there's definitely some sort of cultural bearing
So there's that
on.
respect for
Yeah.
women when they get to a certain, but is that more about menopause or the age? Will they know if that woman has reached menopause, or do they just associate it with a particular age?
I think it's when the woman has gone through the menopause,
Right,
she's been through the change. People would know about it. How they would know, I don't know. I just read about this.
right.
She would just sort of stop covering her head and,
Mm,
just sit there with the men or
yeah.
talking, being herself.
That's really very interesting. And I think that's actually good because I suppose for the women, it's probably boost their confidence knowing that. And we were talking about, going through all these experiences of the menopausal transition can knock your confidence. But then if the culture actually embraces women once they've gone through that and they're postmenopausal, like they're celebrated in a way, you can sit with a man, I mean, I don't in any way um, affirm or support women
Yes.
being unequal at
Yes.
any point in their lives to
Yes.
women, to men, sorry. So I don't think they have to wait, but I think just from that cultural perspective, the societal perspective, that it's actually a good thing that they
Yeah.
become respected when they hit that age, which is interesting. I don't know much about. Um, I come from a Yoruba tribe in
Mm.
Nigeria. I
Mm.
actually don't know if there's any cultural perspective on menopause, which I'm going to try and find out so that when
Mm.
next I come back for another episode, I can share it. But it'll be interesting to know those perspectives because it might still shape how people are being treated in certain areas within those cultures now. So
Mm.
will be good to know.
Definitely very interesting, I think, to get cultural perspectives. The sort of things I've come across have been about how um, women going through the menopause deal with the symptoms, or whether they have problematic symptoms, or whether they actually seek any kind of
Help.
support, any
Mm,
kind of help. Yeah. And my understanding is that black and brown women, or oriental women, don't tend to reach out for support, or don't report problematic, or the assumption is that if they don't ask for help, then they don't go through any kind of problems, or a
mm,
less problematic menopause,
yes.
when
Yeah.
really it could be a lack of awareness, or just a cultural thing that women don't make fuss about.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's one of the reasons why we're doing this to um, kind of heighten the voices of
Mm,
Black, Asian, or other ethnicities within the UK anyway, I should say,
mm,
who are not featured so much in these discussions about menopause, where you see mostly maybe white and Caucasian people who talk about it. So
mm.
very few. And like you're saying, perhaps it's just that cultural um, influence of just you just get on with things, I suppose. That's how well,
Yeah,
whatever, you just get on with it. So maybe that's what hinders people from talking about it because they just
yeah,
feel, I don't want to, like you said, fuss, I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want to burden other people. It's just something I'm going through. I'll just get on with it. But no, we do need to talk about it and reach out for help because it can be very debilitating for some people and they just suffer
yes.
in silence and it's not a good way to live.
No, especially when there is support, there is help that
Mm,
you can get. There are things you can, do to help yourself. Nobody needs to suffer in silence.
yeah.
I'm thinking, in the workplace, if you sort of talk about bias and discrimination, nothing is, I'm saying times have changed, and things are not so in your face, but there's always that fear that you're working against the system. And so
Mm.
you want to keep your head down, and what will people think of me if I say, actually, I
Right.
can't quite
Yeah.
explain it, but I'm finding it difficult, to focus, or I'm going through a few things which makes it difficult for me to feel comfortable to do my work,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.